You're with Left, Right and Centre. I'm Ankita Mukherjee. A former Air Chief Marshal's name figures in a 400 crore alleged kickbacks deal for VVIP choppers. The BJP alleges the government went slow on the probe because an Italian firm was involved. The Defence Minister hits back, saying the deal was initiated during the NDA regime. That's our big focus tonight. We also have the former Air Chief Marshal SP Tyagi talking to us on the show. Well, the BJP today hit hard at the Congress-led UPA government over the Italian chopper deal, now under a cloud, asking why it had not initiated an inquiry in the last 1 year that the deal was being investigated in Italy, given how grave these charges were. It's also been a new low for the military, with the first defence chief to be accused of corruption. But the bigger question, now a political one. Should AK Antony have ordered a CBI inquiry into this a year ago? And has the trail already gone cold?
We proceeded as per the procedures. Defence procurement is not a one-day affair. Process starts, major procurement starts for years together. At every stage, there are a lot of first AON, RFP, GSQR, DSC, Defence Finance, Defence Ministry, Main Finance, Cabinet Secretariat, Prime Minister Secretariat, National Security Council. It's a long process.
In 2000, the then BJP-led government floated a tender for VVIP helicopters as the current Mi-17 choppers were getting dated. But requirement that it's able to fly at 18,000 feet to say Siachen meant there was only one company, Skiroski, eligible. Then, National Security Advisor Brajesh Mishra and the Prime Minister's office said that the Prime Minister and VVIPs do not require to fly to the last Indian post.
The purchase of Westland helicopter proposal was initiated during the NDA regime.
The tender was in 2006, the contract was finalized in 2007, and the contract was signed in February 2010.
So in 2003, the tender specifications to lower the flying altitude was changed. Also, the SPG for security reasons wanted a higher cabin height, so two key criteria were changed. After this, in 2004, Shashindrapal Tyagi, allegedly accused of bribery by Italian investigators, took over as Air Chief Marshal, and under him tenders were issued in 2006. Trials and technical evaluations were held between 2007-2009 during the tenure of Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, and the contract was signed in 2010 when PV Nayak was the Air Chief Marshal. But according to the Indian Express and Italian prosecutors, money was paid to Tyagi's cousins for the deal. They promised and managed to pay through brothers Julie Tyagi, Doxa Tyagi and Sandeep Tyagi. A certain amount of money not yet quantified to Air Chief Marshal Sashi Tyagi, Chief of Staff in the Indian Air Force from 2004 to 2007, to perform and for having performed a deed against his office duties. In particular, the Italian inquiry reportedly says Haska and Gerosa, through the Tyagi brothers, in turn through their cousin Sashi Tyagi, managed first to change the tender details in a favorable way to Augusta Westland, modifying the operational ceiling from 18,000 feet to 15,000 feet of altitude, thus allowing Augusta Westland, which otherwise couldn't have even submitted an offer, to take part in the tender.
Any probe is welcome. The fact is, please understand, not only my name should be cleared, more importantly, the entire Air Force actually comes under cloud in these things, and I would like this cleared very quickly.
While Air Marshal Tyagi claims that a quick CBI investigation will not only clear his name but that of the Indian Air Force, also the government clearly has been caught in the wrong foot by the findings of the prosecutors in Italy. Questions are now being raised as to why the government did not act on reports which started coming out 11 months earlier and where there were allegations of bribery. In New Delhi with Nitin Gokhale, Shruti Ranjan Sen for NDTV.
So what exactly does this Italian prosecution report say? How does it implicate the former Air Chief Marshal? Well, NDTV actually now has a copy of that report. My colleague Vishnu Shom, in fact, joining us with a copy of it. Vishnu, just take us through the important highlights that you're seeing at this point.
Well, here's the strange irony. The media has been able to get hold of this, and it should be mentioned that it was the Indian Express which actually broke this report quite some time back. But now this report is with everybody. The CBI apparently doesn't have a copy of this report. They've sought a copy of this report from the mission in Rome. That being said, the report, it's a prosecutor's report, clearly mentions the role of the former chief Shashi Tyagi. It says that along with his cousins, that I should say three of his cousins, Julie Tyagi, Doshka Tyagi and Sandeep Tyagi, were in fact middlemen in this deal, and they facilitated the transfer of funds or other inducements to Shashi Tyagi, who was then the chief of air staff from 2004 to 2007, to help in a manner such that the air chief influenced this particular deal. I mean, those aren't the exact words used in the prosecutor's report, but that is what the implication is, and this is what the translation turns out to be. Now, Hashka and Jerosa, now these are two known middlemen in this deal through the Tyagi brothers, that's the cousins of the former air chief, managed to change the tender details in a way which was favorable to Augusta Westland, modifying the operational ceiling from 18,000 to 15,000 feet. In other words, reducing the altitude at which these helicopters needed to fly. Now, the air chief, the former air chief, categorically mentions that he wasn't even air chief when these requirements had been changed, so it's unfair to blame him. But what is interesting is that the prosecutor's report suggests that a comparative report on the capabilities of the Augusta Westland AW101 helicopter was presented to the Indian Air Force because it's the only, compared to the other helicopter, the Sikorsky S-92. Let me mention this point quite clearly. The AW101 helicopter has three helicopters. It has a better performance than the Sikorsky S-92 in certain areas. Now, the requirement was never for a helicopter with three engines. All that India required was a helicopter with two engines. That requirement was fulfilled by the Sikorsky S-92, which lost this contract, and the Russian Mi-17, which was earlier withdrawn in this contract. But the point which this prosecutor's report seems to suggest is that by pointing out the benefits of a helicopter with three engines, the Tyagis, or possibly even the air chief, if these allegations are correct, would in a manner have influenced the process by which the Indian Air Force eventually took a decision to acquire this helicopter. So there is mention of how this comparative process of a helicopter with three engines versus a helicopter with two engines was actually made. This was not necessary, as we've been pointing out, but perhaps the suggestion is this could have influenced the eventual decision. Ankita.
All right, Vishnu, thanks very much indeed for joining us with those particular details. But earlier in the day, I spoke to Air Chief Marshal S.P. Tyagi, who of course has vehemently rejected those allegations against him. Sir, thank you very much for speaking with NDTV. Your first reactions to all of this, the preliminary report that's been filed by prosecutors in Italy apparently mentions you by name. What is your reaction?
I'm shocked. I mean, I don't know who this gentleman is. What do I say? I mean, except that my name does figure in it. That's a fact. Why would anybody bribe me, as the charge is beyond comprehension.
This is the first time that a service chief's name has actually figured in a probe into alleged corruption.
I understand that, and therefore it is doubly shocking. The charge is that it appears that I was bribed to change requirements so that Augusta Westland could take part in this competition. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think any changes in requirements were made whilst I was the chief. I have checked with my colleagues. As far as I know, the requirement was first made out in year 2000. Some changes were made in 2003. And then it is true that the tender did go out in 2006 when I was the chief.
Right, and
in
the
March
specific
2007,
Chief Marshal, the specific
I retired, and
right, the specific charge seems to be that the service ceiling requirement for the contract was changed before the tenders were actually issued in 2006, and in effect the charge that is being made is that those requirements were changed to give Augusta Westland a chance to qualify. Is that correct? Could you just explain it for our viewers?
yes, the initial requirement in the year 2000 was for 18,000 feet. Then it turned out that there was only one helicopter in the world which would have met that requirement. That helicopter had a problem because its cabin altitude, or cabin height rather, was not suiting the SPG. They had tall boys who had to stand with their guns to protect the VIPs. Now, I'm only going by what I have heard. I don't have access to official records, but I understand that the government then took a decision to broaden the competition. So, two things were changed. One was the height. From 18,000 feet it was brought down to 15,000 feet so that more competition can take place. In any case, the 18,000 feet helicopter that qualified for it did not suit the SPG. So another speculation or another requirement that was put was that it should have an X amount of cabin height. This was done in the year 2003. Long before I came to Air Headquarters.
All right, but sir, at what point, help us understand this, does a service chief have a role to play in the procurement process?
Well, the Air Headquarters, suggests the requirements of the helicopter, but the checks and balances are such that they are finally approved by the ministry. Air Headquarters cannot change the requirements at will whenever they want. They can at best suggest a change in the requirement, and the final authority is that of the Ministry of Defence.
But sir, the probe also says it names 3 relatives of yours. What do you have to say about that? Did any of your relatives ever meet representatives of Finmechanica or their intermediaries?
I know, firstly, I want to tell you that they are my relatives. There is no doubt about that. They are my cousins. So that should be clearly understood. As far as I know, I mean, when the news items came out in the Indian Express, I obviously had a conversation with them. And I thought my name was being linked because of them. And I can only say what they quoted. They said they were emphatic that they had nothing to do with this, and that they knew the Italians and they had some business connection with them, but they said we have nothing to do with this particular deal. I mean, I can only quote what they said.
So in that case, sir, you are saying that these relatives of yours have in fact worked in the defence sector in the past as well?
I have no knowledge whatsoever of their ever having worked in the defence sector.
And you are saying they did, however, know the Italian firm in question, even if they had no dealings in this?
Oh yes, yes. Because when I asked them, they had told me they knew about it. They knew them, and they have had business dealings with them for what, 15-20 years.
And what business dealings were these, sir?
I understand they were in the power sector. Now I don't have the details, but they were largely working in the power sector.
Now, Guido Haschke, Carlo Gerosa, Christian Michel, these are the names in the charge sheet. Has there ever been any contact between you and any of these 3 gentlemen?
Well, I have met Carlo in my cousin's place. But when you say, do I have contact with him? The answer is no.
But you have met him, sir. And did any talk of any sort of... You just said you met him at your cousin's place.
No. I mean, what connection could I have? I want to tell you that this whole process started after I retired. I mean, in the sense that RFP did go out when I was in serving, but the entire process of evaluation, commercial evaluation, technical evaluation, trials, etc., contract took place in 2010.
All right, but you know, we've already talked about the ceiling requirements. You yourself said that ceiling was changed in effect to widen the competitive field. At what point was that done? And to go back to my earlier question, how did that in a sense help Augusta Westland, which is the charge that's being made?
Look, it was changed in 2003, and I'm not privy to the correspondence that went on at that time, because I was not in the loop at that time. So I only gathered it from my colleagues. All I know is that it was changed in 2003.
But the tenders you're saying were issued in 2006 and no changes were made before that round of tenders being issued.
That is correct. That is correct. This height etc. was finalized in 2003. What took so long was what fitment, because in 2003, because of the cabin height, one suggestion was that the SPG has to be involved in the procurement process. And there is a lot of correspondence between the Ministry Air Headquarters and the SPG on what fitment should be.
So in that case, are you saying that the role of the SPG should also be probed since the CBI is probing the entire deal?
I am not saying who should be probed. That is for the CBI to decide. All I am saying is there are doubts. There is news to say that money has changed hands. Everything doesn't appear clean. But so I feel that there should be an inquiry. Full stop.
And you are welcoming that inquiry?
Of course I am welcoming that. Now and faster the better.
The faster the better. Well, Air Chief Marshal S.P. Tyagi, thank you so much for speaking with NDTV 24/7.
Thank you.
Well, that was the former Air Chief's defense, but we're asking tonight, will this chopper deal that's already being likened to the Bofors scam turn into an even greater embarrassment for the government? We'd also like to remind our viewers that you can in fact join our debate on NDTV's second screen application on your iOS and Android enabled devices. You can log on to the all new NDTV app. You can tap on second screen and see the panel that's joining our show tonight. We're asking, the BJP says the government went slow on the investigation because there was an Italian firm involved. Do you agree? You can also tell us your thoughts. You can send in your questions and vote on the questions already on second screen. And the ones that get the maximum votes will, of course, feature on this program. But tonight, we're being joined on this big debate by Abid Rasool Khan, General Secretary and spokesperson of the Congress, of the Andhra Pradesh Congress Committee, in fact, in the Delhi studio with us. Nalan Kohli, National Executive Committee member of the BJP. We're also being joined tonight by D. Raja, National Secretary of the CPI, Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kark, who's also the Additional Director, Centre for Air Power Studies, Lieutenant General B.S. Malik, former Chief of Staff, Western Command, and Lieutenant General B.R. Raghavan, Defence and Security Analyst. But let me first begin with the BJP, who made a lot of statements today. Nalan Kohli, essentially, the former Air Chief's statement today, the crux of it is that specifications were last changed in 2003. He was not Air Chief then, and when the technical evaluation was finally done, that was in 2010. He had demitted office by 2007. He claims that he couldn't have had any role in influencing the process by which Augusta-Westland choppers were finally selected. And he is in fact throwing the ball right back into the NDA's court.
Well, I think let's look at it. I won't speak for the former Air Chief, and I'm sure that the investigative agencies should arrive at the answers. But the facts speak for themselves. Number one, the contract has been given by the UPA government in 2007. It's been completed in 2010. That's quite a few years after the NDA has demitted office. So first point, if the NDA is really behind this scam, it's fascinating that it will be executed by the UPA and are the kickbacks to have been given to the NDA. As incredulous as it sounds, I think we really should be rejecting that. The second point is that let's also understand this is a strange case. Last year, in about March, we had a massive and lot of television on it also, on the Tetra truck scam, Vectra and all of it. Nothing seems to have happened over the last 1 year. So now we find around that time, the newspapers start reporting about the Italian investigation. What's interesting is the country that receives the money, the country that is the beneficiary of the order, is actually investigating it, and India, as the country that is placing the order and which has to lose as about 350 crores according to the reports, they are not chasing it. So for a whole year there is silence on behalf of the Defence Ministry. It shows scant regard for that. I would like to bring on record that our party spokesperson and Member of Parliament, Mr. Javadekar, raised the question in Parliament in December 2012. He followed it up with a letter to the Defence Minister pointing out about this. It's only when all hell breaks loose and the investigation and there's an arrest in Italy that finally the Defense Ministry seeks to wake up and go ahead and order a CBI probe.
So you're saying the probe in fact should have been initiated at least a year ago?
Certainly. I mean, if you are spending money on a contract where it's assumed that about 10% or about 350 crores have been paid in excess, certainly those who are paying the money, they should question it. And it brings up the next question. That's what the BJP's charge is, that are we seeing a sort of a cover-up? Because we are not seeing any movement whenever there is any charge against the government on corruption scandals. It seems to be pushing it under the carpet. And I pointed out about the Tetra
Let me bring
case.
in the Congress at this point. Abid Rasool Khan joining us this evening. The point that's being made over here is, did the government in fact go slow on a probe? I mean, we heard the Defense Ministry initiate something, but then in effect saying that there were no responses from either Italy or Britain who were asked questions about the deal. Now, of course, we have this report, the prosecution's report in Italy, freely available. NDTV has a copy. It's been reported widely already in a newspaper as well. When it's been this easy, in effect, to get that report, why is it that the government doesn't have a copy with all, the powers at its disposal?
Yeah, first of all, we have to look at when the deal was started. The deal's requirement came in at 2010 when George Fernandez was the defense minister, and we know that how he was involved in the Tahelka and scam and had to resign. Thereafter, Eurocopter was the only copter which was able to supply the specifications what was demanded. But Mr. Brajesh Mishra, who was then Prime Minister's personal secretary or advisor, he wrote a note saying that the height should be reduced and it should be brought down to 15,000 square feet, height 15,000 feet. And based on that, the Augusta as well as Swarovski became technically viable to quote for this. Now Mr. Nalin says that the money has changed hand, it changed hands at the time of tender, but I would like to say that the money could also change hand when the deal requirements were being framed. And because the requirements were framed in such a way that a particular firm or a particular company is kept out and a particular company is brought in. So that needs to also be investigated, and we need a statement from their then Prime Minister, whose personal assistant wrote this note. Secondly, as far as going slow, about a year back when our government came to know about these allegations and about the inquiry, they have been asking the Italian government to send a report and the documents available with them. But because of the international law and the jurisdiction, these papers came late, and our government promptly ordered a CBI probe, and just now I heard the
But
chief
you have
also
a copy now of these documents. The government has a copy.
But that copy which is available with you cannot be relied upon by the government of India. It's a very sensitive deal. The copy
I'm asking, sir, does the government now have a copy of the prosecution's report?
Yes, I think they have obtained a copy. Based on the copy, the CBI inquiry has been ordered and it will go to its logical end. Our defense minister and external affairs minister affirmed this, that they will go to a logical end and whoever is guilty will be booked. There is no two ways about that.
Just two quick responses. I mean, we can really look at this on facts, and the other side we can look at it on hope. Now, on facts is the entire Italian investigation is pointing to, and it has, I mean, basically, the entire thing which is being debated today is the fact that 350 crores approximately have exchanged hands, and it's exchanged hands in the recent past. Certainly not, and that's exactly what the thing is. Now, you want to take it back with hope. Sir, I'll just finish my point. I'll just finish my point, sir. Please respond after that. That's the first part about it. So, I mean, we are just, I would not really buy that argument easily, but of course, the Congress is entitled to make it if they want to. The second point is, we would like to see the question here about defense or any other scams is, we've not seen any closure as such. What we are seeing is that investigations are purportedly supposed to be given. The question of credibility certainly comes back, and the nation obviously would like to see closure. So the question that will go out is, while we are discussing this new scam, can we also know what happened a year ago on the Tetra scam? What is the process?
Fair point, Abid Rasool Khan. The CBI's track record on investigating defense deals hasn't exactly been stellar.
Yeah, I would like to assure Mr. Nalin that whatever investigations we have taken, we have brought it to the logical end. We have put the people behind bars. We have taken very serious view of it. Now, as far as the scams which were there in BJP government, starting from Tahelka, Kargil coffins, Operation Vijay, we need to also get an answer from BJP what they have done about these major scams which were there. They just cannot blame. And secondly, I would like to tell one thing, that BJP is creating this only to prepare a ground for the upcoming parliament session, nothing, and they have in the habit of disturbing the parliament and creating a ruckus. When a CBI probe has been ordered, why can't they wait for the probe and give a time frame for it to do the inquiry?
Well, I mean, we'd be happy to receive a time frame from the government. We are in no position really to offer a time frame from our side, and so far there hasn't been a time frame ever. Number one.
What I mean
Number
to say
two, sir,
is
may I just finish my point? I'm responding.
Yeah.
And the second point is, if we have to look at the history of scams, we can certainly start from 1948, the famous Jeep scam, and I'll be happy to debate scams from 1948 right up to 2012, which includes 55 years of Congress.
Well, I think that kind of brings us to the moot point over here. Do we need more transparency in all defense deals? And D. Raja, if you could come in at this point, do you believe that perhaps the entire defense establishment, in a sense, and the way in which procurement is done now needs some sort of greater transparency, and what would you like to see happening?
Definitely, I did make a statement to this effect. Something seriously rotten continues to haunt our defense establishment, and we have seen the Bofors scandal, we have seen the submarine scandal, we have seen this coffin scandal. Some time back, the former army chief, Mr. V.K. Singh, made a shocking statement that he was offered a bribe by someone to get sanction for substandard vehicles. So something rotten that is going on in defense establishment, and there is no transparency how these defense purchase deals are concluded or negotiated, what is the need for third persons or middlemen in the deals. No transparency at all. Time has come. We will have to evolve a mechanism which can bring transparency in all these defense deals and make answerable to Parliament and people. And despite what Mr. Anthony has assured the nation about strong actions against guilty, about the CBI inquiry, the time has come. As nation, we will have to think of a mechanism. And it is not Congress or BJP, it is not Parliament session or no Parliament session.
Right.
It is nation's interest. Those who are being accused are all people at the top. And it also brings the nation's security concern. Because they are the people who involve in defense strategies, who formulate the security policies. And if they are involved in such scams, there is a possibility of compromising national security, and this is a much more serious concern, and we will have to discuss, and Parliament will have to debate and discuss how such things keep on happening with our defense establishment.
It is indeed a matter of national security, and Air Marshal Kapil Kak, if I can bring you in. At this point, we heard the Defence Minister today saying due process was followed, that this was something, the deal went through the Defence and the Finance Ministries, the PMO, the Cabinet, and that at every point there were checks and balances. And yet, when you hear of a prosecution report in a court in another land which talks about middlemen, by law, having middlemen in a defence deal in this country is illegal. Which may or may not be the case in other countries, but the very fact that there were middlemen as part of the process seems to indicate a certain amount of illegality, at least in this case.
No, there is no illegality. The fact is that there are three, I mean, the UPA, before that the NDA, a period of nearly 11 years has elapsed from the time you actually formulated the requirement to replace the Mi-8 and Mi-17 with a state-of-the-art helicopter to conform to the security environment, to conform to the need to modernize, to have a state-of-the-art machine. That's the first part. The second part is, I think it was very interesting hearing this political debate. The question is that there is also an international perspective to this, because CBI's ability to investigate is to a large extent constrained by the fact that there is an Italian investigation in progress. The prosecutors are independent, and the Italian government was loath to give any information.
Are you saying that there could not have been a CBI probe a year ago?
The change, Ankita, has happened because Rossi has been arrested. This is the first action that has been taken. Otherwise, you're only talking about a report. I saw the report in October 2012.
But the report raised grave questions. You do admit
that is what needs to be investigated. But I think the focal point is, unfortunately, we are missing that out. we are looking at the international ramifications, we are looking at the political. But what about the operational requirement, the laying out of those operational requirements, the parameters, the fact that there are multiple agencies at multiple levels? It's not just 3 ministries, it's also agencies who are involved in defense procurement. Question of Air Headquarters, Director General of Quality Assurance, which is not uniformed. Then you have the requirement committee.
Let me just bring in Director General B.S. Malik as well. So that was a point that was made by the former Air Chief today as well, that if there were any changes made in the requirements, as and when they were done in 2003, as he contends, these were technical ones which were necessary for optimizing operational performances.
Ankita, I'm glad you brought out this point. The whole thing remains that defense has become an arena, because we are not making all our armament ourselves. 70% comes from outside. Political parties come, political parties go. Requirements of the armed forces are not filled in, but at the same time, money is being made, scams are being unearthed one after another. Because as far as we are concerned, as Air Chief Marshal quite rightly brought out, only in the technical parameters. We want this particular thing to operate for this particular task. In that also, as the Air Chief Marshal again pointed out, SPG has its own requirement. For the life of me, I cannot understand why certain electronic countermeasures, why certain chef and flare dispensers, why certain other requirements were put in this, where the armed forces are finding it very difficult to keep the fleet in Siachen going, where the people are dying. Soldiers find it very difficult to be evacuated, and everything can only reach through the cheetahs, which is now gone past the flying hours and the engine life. There we find it difficult. I was just working out the rough cost. It's 20 times the cost. Something to reach in the same height, to do lesser for the VVIPs who may come once in a while. You have such a lot of hullabaloo and such a lot of requirement, but anything which is happening day to day, no one is bothered.
All right. There are 2 interjections coming in. Yes, D. Raja, go ahead. Yes.
No, nobody disputes that our army, our defense personnel should have modern equipments, should have very standard vehicles. Nobody disputes that. We are asking about the scam. It is a fact that scam took place. And it is a fact some people who were at the top are being accused for this scam. What is the answer for that? We understand there is a technical aspect, but there is another financial aspect and there is another security aspect. Who should be held responsible? Nobody can be held responsible. What is that we are discussing?
The point is very clear. Once the requirements have been made out, and in that also you find certain groups like the SPG in this case, they wanted a certain boom height, they wanted certain other features to be added. As for the armed forces are concerned, in this case the Air Force, as once the requirements are worked out, all that they have to do it is this technically feasible? What all is required technically? Nothing else. And this has happened not the first time, this has happened many times over, that once the technical parameters have been tested, extensive testing has been done, and then the armed forces, whichever the service, maybe Army, Navy or the Air Force, says these are the 3 equipment, and then comes in the power play. Then comes the political parties, and then they accuse each other.
In your opinion, who should be held responsible for this scam?
Right from the time the requirement was made out, and right from the time that changes in this were suggested because of the requirement. If there is anything to do with the testing, the airworthiness, then it is quite simple. But as for the others are concerned, we are the people who go into the detail of the SPG and the other people who modified the changes, who brought in the changes. At one time you say VVIPs wanted to go to the Siachen. There is no requirement to go to that height. Incidentally, the height there is about 20,000. So it can't go to 18. They brought, even the 18 less to 15.
All right.
Actually were looking
very
for?
Specifically in this case exactly, Nalin Kohli, if I can just flag this to you, a comparative report was presented to the Indian Air Force in 2006, which talked about the benefit of the 3rd engine, which was something that was only with the Augusta Westland chopper in which is contentious over here. This is the bit that perhaps influenced the actual process of selecting it. That's the contention that's being made, at least in the prosecution's report.
I think, Ankita, we need to look at two, the core issues, and we need to look at the additional issues, if any. Let's start with the one by one. The core issue is what? Was money paid? It's conclusively where the Italian probe points, yes, money was paid. That's why they have arrested somebody senior from that very organization. That's the first part. So kickbacks were given. Two, have the kickbacks pointed to which tenure? Has it pointed to the UPA government? Is it pointing to officers who were serving that point? Yes, that's what this probe is talking about. Three, are we then to start looking at what happened preceding it? Because then we can look back at everything would have a route. So if there is today a requirement for a submarine, it may take 15 years before the submarine may come. Governments may change. It comes down to the point, when is the contract given? And who was ultimately, if there were kickback given, who was in position to receive those kickbacks? So these are core issues. And the fourth, and significantly what we are raising, is why has there been a delay? When this has been in public domain, in the newspapers, in the print, on television, starting as way back a year ago, what has taken the government so long to act till there was an arrest in Italy? So the final point comes up related to this, that the country which receives the money, the country which is inherently basically the beneficiary of the deal, is investigating it, and the country which is India is losing money on the deal, is slowing its pace down. And you point questions to the BJP NDA. I think that's incredulous.
All right, Lieutenant General V.R. Raghavan, do come in at this point in the discussion and respond to some of the points that the BJP is making on this show.
Well, I think we should be very proud of the fact that we have a system where an incoming government does not unilaterally cancel the arrangements and agreements or the decisions that were taken by the previous government, at least in the national security arena. It's something which is very healthy, and we should be confident of the fact that successive governments go through with the decisions taken by the previous government, which is a good point. The issue is that whether we should be talking about who took the money, who paid the money, or whether our processes are right or wrong. You can see that a helicopter deal took more than a decade, nearly 13 years for it to be finalized, or somewhere halfway point where the tenders were issued. Yet the SPG comes in at a stage where most of the decisions have been already taken. And I think the SPG was quite right in saying, if you want our boys and our weapons on board the helicopter when a VIP is flying, the cabin size is not adequate. Therefore, we will have to look, either amend the qualitative requirements, or they redesign the machine, or we look for some other place. A mention has been made for the National Security Advisor. Why did he do it? I don't know. One possibility is that he felt that going to a single dealer or a single vendor would raise accusations of partiality or favoritism, etc. He wanted to widen the scope. The other issue is, why 15,000? Why not 14,000? Why not 13,000? Who decides these? There are technical dimensions of this where committees and experts meet and do this. I've been heading the Siachen area for a very long time, and I can tell you that I have not seen a VVIP going anywhere towards 18,000 feet. There is no necessity for it.
In your opinion, none of this actually,
to be brought down.
So in your opinion, none of these actually raise red flags at all?
Yes, I personally believe that one should focus on why this money was given, why middlemen came into the play, and who gave this, who received the money. The point is that at every stage where technicalities are changed, either to suit the market or the national security dimension or of a dealer, there is always a possibility that some money will change hand, some consideration will come into account. We have to go into that as to why this is occurred.
Lieutenant General Malik, let me just bring you in on that. Worrying that a former air chief is named, worrying that at least 3 of his cousins are also named in that report. how do you react to that, and do you believe that this has in a sense cast a shadow over the defense services today?
It certainly has, the way it has come out. But the fact is, we need to point out where exactly, with what purpose this changes were made, as General Raghavan is quite rightly saying. If the changes were made at the time of a particular chief's tenure, then obviously he had extraneous reasons for doing so. Now we got to determine that those reasons, was he the sole person to introduce them? Was it guided by the SPG? Was it guided by anyone else? And did anyone oversee the whole activity? Because as per my understanding, the armed forces come into the technical evaluation, into the trials. And in this case, as far the technical evaluation is concerned and the trials is concerned, that no one is being talked to, or no one is talking about that portion. Other that at what stage the SPG or anyone else introduced the item, was it with an ulterior motive, or was it simply because they felt that there is a requirement that this particular thing is so essential that help will meet the requirement?
See, the question is, the operational requirement is the prerogative of the users. In this case, the users are the Air Force. Secondly, and importantly, this is a VVIP aircraft, helicopter. And the requirement is not, as General Malik earlier mentioned, that why are we going towards VVIP helicopters and not about the operational requirement of the armed forces. I think it's a sterile debate, because you also need comfortable, secure environment for the travel of our VVIPs, not just national VVIPs. I've been flying VVIPs for 5 years, many years ago, including planning on how ASRs are prepared for aircraft. I think we need to understand there are foreign VVIPs who come here. India has a rising profile in the international system. But the focus, I think, we need to make is, one, the lowering of altitude is an uninformed debate, because the lowering of altitude is not just an accusation that somebody has altered it, it's also to provide competition. You don't want a single vendor situation. Then you look at, if you have laid out what needs to be replaced, how will this particular helicopter replace it? You talked about 3 engines. If you have a helicopter with 2 engines and you have another helicopter with 2 engines and both are being compared, excuse me, I'd prefer a 3-engine helicopter, because it gives me additional safety for the flight of VVIPs. So I think at the end of the day, it is far more important, as General Raghavan rightly said, you look at who has done this. That investigation is on, it will take a while. It's not going to come any day soon.
But I think that brings us really back to one of the worrying points in this entire prosecution report in Italy, the fact that 3 middlemen are named. And today when I asked him, the former Air Chief Marshal said he had actually met one of these people.
Yeah, that's being very frank. He's not hiding anything. I mean, you need to appreciate that he's out in the open. He's telling you he has cousins. The cousins were involved in this. He had nothing to do in that involvement process. He's also saying that he met this gentleman in his cousin's house. Nothing, no harm in that. You see, the bigger issue, Ankita, I think, is the question, are our procurement procedures sound and robust? I think, and this cuts through three different chiefs, it cuts through governments. The procurement process has been refined from 2002, if I remember correctly, till today, and it gets validated every year. There is transparency, there is an integrity pact under which you can call off a deal, you can blacklist the person, you can get all the monies you have paid to that. So I think by and large this needs to be refined more and more. The deal has been done professionally. There are 300, as far as I know, there are 300 parameters which have been evaluated across the board in all the helicopters. And what General Malik said is very right. We're forgetting that there were extensive flight trials, not only done in London, but also in the so-called hot and high environment, which our VVIPs may have to be actually involved in.
All right, you're saying that there are enough built-in checks and balances already, essentially.
And it needs to be improved further.
D. Raja, you clearly don't agree.
No, as far as operational requirements are concerned, it is the prerogative of armed forces. I don't question that, I don't dispute that. I am in agreement with what Mr. Raghavan has said. My question is, there were middlemen. These middlemen happened to be close to the people who were at the top at that point of time, whether they may be relatives or close to the people at the top. Now a kickback has been paid, a scam has taken place. Who should be held responsible? And we can wash our hands, nothing happened. It was all due to requirements of the armed forces. We can wash up our hands and say nothing happened.
Mudassir Khan, respond to that.
Yeah. The panel of speakers are great authorities among themselves, and as far as technicalities are concerned, they are far better judge of what is to be done. I would like to respond to Mr. D. Raja with great respect that the Army, Air Force and SPG are great institutions who cannot be demoralized just by an allegation. We need to wait for the inquiry to be completed, and if anybody has been involved in shady deals, they will be definitely booked at whatever level it may be. Then Mr. Kohli also said that fingers are pointing towards some particular period. I would like to say, after listening to all the panelists, the fingers are pointing towards the period when the deal was being worked out, not after the tenders have come. Secondly, I also feel that the BJP has some sort of problem. Whenever anything comes with Italy or something, they put it under suspicion. The point is, Italy is a great technical giant which is doing great production and in number of fields, and the tenders which were called were totally through a process, as all the officers have told, that it has got a different methodology under which we called. We just cannot blame somebody without coming to the logical end. Now, as far as Italy is concerned, I would like to say that India does not give any sort of favorable treatment to them, and BJP has only a sort of apprehension and obsession to just bring that name inside for their ulterior motives.
But why let the tail go cold? Why wait for a year? To come back to that question.
No, wait for a year. Our external affairs minister, our defense minister have clearly explained in their version that the papers have been sought for at the highest government level, and the papers, after getting all the incident, we will take it up. This was also
so you say that you believe there has been no delay. You believe?
No, the delay is technical. It's not a delay wantedly happening or somebody is covering up somebody to avoid something. We are working on an international law, international jurisdiction. There are two countries which need to answer this. You have to give some sort of time for this. You just cannot say this is an allegation, you put them behind the bar.
Or you quick last comment, 30 seconds, just a technical delay.
Quickly, 30 seconds, I'd say we do not have a problem with the Italian connection vis-a-vis the investigation that's done there. We have a problem that nothing has been done here. The second point I'd like to point out is, sir, if I may just finish. Second point I'd like to just point out is that in this case, what the government has certainly delayed. It's been a year. And to say that the government, it took them a year to even get the papers, I think that's really incredulous when the whole media has it. Number three I'd like to point out is that India's reputation is really going for a 6. When a government is involved in scam after scam and nothing finally happens unless the Supreme Court starts stepping in, I think we have an unfortunate situation. So when we see the guilty brought to book, when we see clear answers, will we have some credibility?
Alright, will we see clear answers or not? I think we're going to be discussing this for a long time yet, but I'd like to thank all our panelists for joining me tonight on this discussion. That's all we have time for on the Left, Right and Centre tonight, but do join us again tomorrow night. For the moment though, India Decides at 9 comes up right after this break.